The helicopter hovered over the back streets of Manhattan. To the untrained eye, it would look like any commercial or news helicopter, the kind of thing that might catch your attention for a moment and then leave just as quickly as your mind wanders over to wondering what you'll have for dinner. Nobody would know from a mere glance that Mobile Task Force Iota-5 were inside, a four-man team on a dangerous mission. This has always been the greatest power of the SCP Foundation, hiding in plain sight, using the mundane as a cloak to go unnoticed. But this time, the monster they were hunting was capable of doing the exact same thing. And for the personnel of the Foundation, this ability is an affectation, a learned and adopted skill. For SCP-247, this ability, that it employs to deadly effect, comes as naturally as breathing air. The helicopter was monitoring local police scanners and phone activity, as well as receiving direct radio orders from command back at a classified containment site. The latest intel was incoherent, horrified screaming over the phone traced back to a nearby alleyway. Someone had seen something horrifying. This was Iota-5's cue to intervene. They rappelled down from the helicopter onto the roof of a nearby tenement building, clad in thick tactical armor, anti-memetic scramble goggles, Dan Inject IM injection rifles loaded with 10cc S10 syringe darts, each one carrying an immobilizing payload of potent fast-acting xylazine, and high-powered conventional weaponry in case of emergencies. If anyone in the world was capable of tracking, securing, and containing SCP-247, it was these four operatives. And yet, by the end of today's mission, one of them would be dead. But they didn't know that yet. Like all good MTF members, they had tunnel vision for the mission at hand. They used a fire escape ladder on the side of the building to reach the bottom of the alleyway quickly. There they came upon a gruesome sight, the aftermath of an attack. On the ground, a dead body with what looked like claw marks all over it. Iota-5 found another civilian, half mad with confusion and terror, hiding behind a nearby dumpster. She just kept shaking and repeating, "But she was so little," over and over again. One member of the task force, Corporal Rico, elected to stay behind and secure the area, while Foundation cleanup teams zeroed in to sweep the scene and provide amnestics to witnesses. The remaining three continued the high-stakes chase on foot. Their eyes in the sky radioed in. "Stay frosty, Iota. We've got unusual incident reports from an apartment building a quarter click north of your position. Potential fatalities. 247 is in an extremely hostile state. Engage with caution. Over." The trio engaged quickly, running towards the source of the disturbance at breakneck speeds. They knew they were getting closer when they heard the shrieking and the deep, guttural growls, that low primal rumbling of a true apex predator. Already, this containment breach was turning out to be a horrific mess. It was going to be a nightmare for the higher-ups at the cleanup and misinformation departments to handle, paying to repair inexplicable property damage, providing amnestics to tens if not hundreds of traumatized witnesses, creating plausible cover stories for upwards of at least 10 dead New Yorkers. But even all that mess would have to wait until the creature was actually captured and contained once more, which would be an ordeal unto itself. They found SCP-247's access point into the building, a wooden door torn to splinters by huge claws and fangs. Iota-5 charged inside, injection rifles at the ready, only to find carnage in the hallway. 3 more bodies, with deep claw marks cutting into their flesh. It was a harrowing sight, but the team didn't have time to waste processing it. They needed to stop 247 before it killed again and again and again. The team followed the trail of blood and the claw marks carved into the ground where 247 had passed. After killing the 3 people in the hallway, it destroyed another door and gained access to a nearby stairwell. The blood continued up the steps. Iota-5 pursued. The next splintered door, clawed and bashed off its hinges, led them further. They could hear the growling again, distant but clearly audible. They were close. There were another 2 attacked corpses in the hallway. Previous corpses had been partially or even entirely eaten. These 2 had just been clawed to death. Defensive kills. They'd backed the beast into a corner, and now it was panicking, slaughtering anything it perceived as an interference. They pressed on now. This was the endgame. Soon they found the final busted door. This one led into one of the building's private apartments. There'd be no other way out from here. 247 was trapped. The 3 members of Iota 5 shouldered their injection rifles and crept inside, full stealth mode. Something about the apartment was haunting. It portrayed all the signs of belonging to a young single mother and her only son. This was confirmed when they found the dead body of the mother in the living room, eyes glassy and throat clawed out with one feral strike. They could hear something else in the apartment too, a soft, gentle cooing, too human to be anything else. They followed the noise until they reached the child's bedroom. What they saw there caused even the most hardened member of the trio to break out in a cold sweat. This was the one thing they didn't want to happen. The child, utterly oblivious to the atrocities that had unfolded in his building, to even the death of his own mother, was sitting in his bedroom petting a kitten. It was the sweetest little cat you've ever seen. A fluffy, harmless creature with an orange striped coat. This is the dreaded SCP-247. The child just kept repeating, "Good kitty, while petting her. SCP-247 purred and rolled around playfully. To the untrained eye, it would seem that a kitty like this couldn't hurt a fly, but that's where you couldn't be more wrong. Iota 5 stared at this display in a state of nerve-shredding terror, thinking fast, trying to calculate their next move. "Aw, what an adorable little cat," one of the Iota 5 members found themselves blurting out. It was clear that 247's effects were starting to have an impact on even these hardened soldiers, and they needed to act quickly. They could fire a tranquilizer dart right here or right now, but in the ensuing panic, SCP-247 would almost definitely lash out and maul the child. It wasn't a risk that they could take, but time was already running out. 247 would only allow the child to play for so long before something terrible happened. It was an inevitable part of SCP-247's process. That's when Private Kowalski, one of the remaining members of Iota 5, stepped forward. He was about to do the only thing he could do, knowing that it would cost him his life. As he took his final action, the Foundation credo looped once more through his head. "We die in the dark, so that others can live in the light." Fighting against the urge to rush forward and start petting the cat, he instead lunged forward and struck the cat with his foot. Immediately it turned and pounced, knocking Kowalski against the wall with terrifying force. It gave the most ferocious growls as it tore into the screaming Kowalski, eviscerating his abdomen. The child screamed and retreated into the opposite corner of the room. Kowalski was done for, but now his teammates had a clear shot. They secured 247 in their sights and unloaded several darts into its flank, sedating it with their powerful tranquilizers. Soon after, it gave a lethargic growl and collapsed onto the ground. An evac and containment team were already on the way, along with the cleaners. Many had died that day, but at least SCP-247 would be brought back into containment, preventing further bloodshed. Kowalski would be given a posthumous Medal of Bravery for his selfless actions in the line of duty, as well as a generous stipend to his grieving family. By this point, you're probably wondering, how can a harmless kitten cause so much carnage, mayhem, and despair? The answer is simple. It's not a kitten at all. It's a fully grown female Bengal tiger, 9 feet and 400 pounds of pure muscle, with 4-inch claws, 4-inch canines, and an inbuilt killer instinct. But due to an anomalous mimetic effect, 247 can only ever be perceived as a sweet, tiny house cat. But even worse, due to its additional cognitohazardous properties, almost everyone who sees 247 is compelled to approach and begin dotting and fawning over it. And that's exactly how it gets its prey. Its mimetic properties are actually so flawless that, regardless of Foundation countermeasures, it has never been perceived as anything other than a kitten. It's actually only through forensic analysis into things like bite and claw marks left on victims, measurements of weight, and abnormal water displacement in aqueous environments that we can tell it's really a tiger at all. For a brief period, SCP-148, a metal that seems to counteract cognitohazards and mind-warping anomalies, was used in the containment of this Euclid Class creature, but these measures were abandoned after SCP-148 proved to have a negative impact on nearby Foundation staff after prolonged exposure. Now strict protocols of surveillance and distancing are required to prevent hapless Foundation staff members from being lured into their doom by 247. The head researcher on the SCP-247 case wanted to conduct a series of experiments on SCP-247, hoping to find out more about the interplay of its unique traits with other members of the animal kingdom. 2 control animals were brought in to represent the duality of SCP-247. Control A was a yellow kitten, roughly matching 247's apparent shape and size. Control B was a fully grown Bengal tiger, representing 247's actual shape and size. A mixed breed cat-chasing terrier was brought in for the first test. It immediately followed Control A around, barking wildly until it retreated up a tree. Unsurprisingly, it fled in terror from Control B, cowering in the corner. Control B paid no mind to the dog, perhaps considering it beneath its attention, even as prey. With SCP-247, the dog initially ran towards it, barking until it was only 5 meters away. At this point, 247 let out an irritated mewling noise, and the dog fled to the corner in terror, suddenly aware of its true nature. For test number 2, a male tabby kitten was brought in. As expected, it simply played with Control A and was terrified of Control B. In the first part of the test with 247, the anomalous attributes of the creature led to some surreal, mind-bending footage. At multiple points, 247 picked up the other kitten, as an adult female tiger might do with a cub, and lifted it higher than 247 seemed to be capable of. It was like watching a glitch in real time. In the second part of the test, the kitten immediately fled in terror, suggesting 247 can control how it's perceived. Next came a deer, prey typical of a Bengal tiger. Neither Control B nor 247 were fed for 3 days prior to this experiment, and both killed and ate the deer. However, curiously, 247 killed the deer with a single merciful bite to the neck before eating, compared to its more brutal methods with human targets. And when this experiment was repeated with 247 after it hadn't been starved, it showed little interest in the deer until it became hungry again, suggesting it inherently prefers human or human-like prey. This theory was further reinforced during tests with a chimpanzee. The chimp fell under 247's cognitohazardous spell and began to pet it. 7 minutes later, 247 attacked and brutally devoured the chimp as it would its human prey. But strangely, the most frightening result of all came when SCP-247 was paired with an adult male Bengal tiger. They engaged in standard mating behavior, which later led to the duo reproducing a new creature, designated SCP-247-1, which had all the anomalous traits of SCP-247, but the frightening realizations don't stop there. Studies into genetic material provided by SCP-247 show slight deviation from a typical Bengal tiger's genotype, suggesting contamination from another creature that mated with one of its non-anomalous tiger parents. For context, tiger broods have an average of 3 cubs, but can have as many as 7, a common practice given how tiger cubs are vulnerable to cannibalism from rival adult males looking to court the females. This leads to only one frightening conclusion. There could be more creatures just like SCP-247 out there, apex predators that seem to the untrained eye like cute, harmless kittens. They could be anywhere. And if they're close enough to each other or other non-anomalous tigers, they could breed even further, becoming the scariest invasive urban species you've ever seen. Because after all, we know what their preferred prey is now. So the next time you see a cute little orange tabby cat and feel the instinct to pet it, take a second to think about it. It may be the last thing you ever do. Now go check out SCP-4511 Swine God and SCP-2845 Alien God Crash Lands on Earth, the Deer, for more animalistic SCPs that'll really get inside your head.